The mystery of the Mary Celeste transcends the simple maritime ledger of lost ships, establishing itself as the quintessential symbol of the ocean's enduring ability to conceal. Discovered on December 5, 1872, sailing quietly under partial canvas near the Azores Islands, the American-built brigantine was structurally sound and well-provisioned, yet every soul aboard, Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, his daughter, and the crew of 7, had vanished without a trace. The enduring paradox lies in the contradiction of the scene: a perfect ship, a perfect mystery, devoid of the telltale signs of struggle, piracy, or devastating storm. To fully appreciate the power of this enigma, one must undertake a deep exploration of its 3 defining historical pillars: the ship's genesis as the cursed Amazon, the minute forensic detail of its abandonment, and the cynical, litigious aftermath that ultimately led to its ignoble, criminal end. Part 1. The Dark Genesis and the Curse of the Amazon. The foundation of the Mary Celeste's legend rests upon a history so troubled that it fostered an intense superstition among mariners. Launched in 1861 in Nova Scotia, the ship was originally named the Amazon. Her early career was immediately marred by a series of catastrophic misfortunes that seemed to defy chance. Before the Amazon could even complete her maiden voyage, her first captain, Robert McClellan, fell gravely ill and died suddenly in port. A tragic start that immediately branded the vessel as unlucky. Subsequent captains and owners found themselves wrestling with a vessel seemingly determined to harm itself. In the ensuing years, the Amazon suffered repeated and costly incidents: a serious collision in the English Channel, grounding off the coast of Maine, and the deaths of subsequent crew members. These relentless misfortunes created significant financial losses for her owners. By 1867, after being extensively damaged and nearly sinking off Cape Breton Island, the ship was salvaged and sold to American owners. It was at this juncture that she was extensively rebuilt, re-registered in New York, and given the name Mary Celeste. This act of renaming was a conscious attempt to exorcise the vessel's perceived curse, a cultural attempt to restart her destiny. However, this history of sudden death, financial ruin, and repeated calamity lingered in the consciousness of the international maritime community, ensuring that any subsequent disaster would be viewed not as an accident, but as the fulfillment of a dark fate. This psychological background is essential. It confirms that the crew that sailed with Captain Briggs was serving aboard a ship with an already fraught reputation, adding a profound unspoken layer of anxiety that would amplify any threat they might encounter. The scene of abandonment and granular forensic detail. The discovery of the Mary Celeste by the British brigantine Dei Gratia on December 5, 1872, presented an investigative puzzle unmatched in naval history. The Dei Gratia's mate, Oliver Deveau, led the boarding party and provided the minute detail that both illuminated and complicated the mystery. The contradictory evidence. The ship's physical condition was the first paradox. Though the Mary Celeste was sailing poorly, with some sails tattered and ropes hanging loose, the hull was sound. The bilge contained 3.5 feet of water, a notable amount, but easily pumped out by the crew. Crucially, a deck pump was found disassembled, its components laid out, suggesting the crew was actively working on it when they were suddenly interrupted. The most damning evidence against piracy or general disaster was the orderly state of the interior. The provisions. 6 months' worth of food and water were untouched. The personal effects. Money, jewelry, and personal valuables were left in the captain's cabin, directly countering any robbery motive. The galley. A meal, likely breakfast, was partially eaten and left on the table. This forensic snapshot implies an instantaneous decision to leave that occurred between the ship's last log entry, November 25th, placing the ship off the Azores, and the moment of the discovery. The missing clues and intent. The list of missing items confirms the crew's intention. They did not panic, but abandoned the ship with the belief they would return, or at least survive to reach land. The missing lifeboat. The only lifeboat was gone, signaling a deliberate launching. The navigation instruments. The chronometer and sextant were missing, tools essential for any subsequent navigation. The missing papers. The captain's log and ship's register were absent. The act of removing the chronometer and sextant while leaving behind the ship's registry and bill of lading, legally less important for survival, shows that Captain Briggs believed he was facing a brief, localized threat and prioritized tools for survival over documentation. The absence of the people, therefore, points inexorably to a moment of extreme terror that forced them into the lifeboat, followed by a subsequent, irreversible separation from the ship. Part 3. The judicial farce of the Gibraltar Inquiry. The aftermath of the discovery, rather than providing clarity, compounded the tragedy. The salvage operation and subsequent legal inquiry in Gibraltar were dominated by the aggressive cynicism of the Attorney General, Frederick Solly Flood. Flood was immediately convinced of foul play and used the inquiry as a vehicle to prosecute Captain Morehouse and the crew of the Dei Gratia for murder, or to prove a vast insurance fraud conspiracy involving both captains. Flood's investigative techniques were openly prejudiced. He seized upon two crucial, yet ambiguous pieces of physical evidence: the reddish stain on the captain's cutlass, which he publicly declared to be human blood, despite the stain later proving to be non-human, and the aforementioned small gashes on the ship's bow, which Flood insisted were made by a sharp instrument during a struggle. His cross-examination of the Dei Gratia crew was hostile and unrelenting, focusing on their history and their motives. The inquiry, however, eventually collapsed under the weight of logical contradictions. The crew's alibis held firm, the valuables remained untouched, and the ship's condition was too intact for a violent struggle. Despite being unable to prove his criminal theories, Flood succeeded in poisoning the well of public opinion. While the court eventually awarded a salvage fee, the amount was unusually low, reflecting the deep-seated but unsubstantiated suspicion that tainted the judicial process. This hostile, inconclusive ruling served only to cement the Mary Celeste's mystery and allowed the more sensational and fictionalized theories of violence and mutiny to take root. Part 4. The unseen terror and competing theories. The failure of the inquiry to find a criminal solution turned attention definitively to the most probable non-violent causes: the combination of the ship's cursed history and the volatile nature of its cargo. The chemical volatility, the fume explosion theory. This is the consensus theory among naval historians and scientists. The cargo of unrefined industrial alcohol was shipped in wooden barrels that were known to leak vapor. Under the rising temperatures and pressure of the South Atlantic, this highly flammable vapor could have ignited, causing a non-destructive puff explosion. This event, while contained, thus explaining the lack of fire damage, would have created a terrifying blast of sound and a brief gout of flame. The terror of witnessing an explosion in the hold, containing thousands of gallons of alcohol, would have convinced Captain Briggs that a catastrophic secondary blast was imminent. This psychological pressure, amplified by the ship's dark reputation, motivated the immediate precautionary evacuation into the lifeboat. This theory alone successfully accounts for the removal of the navigation tools, intended return, and the hurried nature of the abandonment. Critique of environmental theories. The popular theories of a freak wave or waterspout are ultimately less plausible. While a massive rogue wave could cause panic, it would likely sweep the deck clean, making the deliberate collection of the sextant unlikely. Furthermore, these events would cause more significant, lasting structural damage than the Mary Celeste exhibited. Similarly, theories involving seismic activity or sea monsters fail because they do not account for the precise, ordered removal of navigation tools, a sign of conscious intent, not simply unthinking flight. Part 5. The fictional legacy and the ship's final demise. The Mary Celeste did not disappear from the record. She became immortalized in fiction. In 1884, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle published J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement, a story that fictionalized the event by introducing themes of racial murder and mutiny, which were then incorrectly accepted by the public as truth, forever skewing the historical narrative toward violence. The ship's actual post-mystery life was a litany of minor accidents and constant changes in ownership, confirming the enduring power of its supposed curse. The Mary Celeste passed through more than a dozen different owners, each suffering financial ruin or bad luck. Her tragic final chapter came in 1885, when her final captain, Gilman C. Parker, deliberately sailed the vessel onto a reef off the coast of Haiti, in a poorly conceived plot to commit insurance fraud. The act, the final insult to the ship's legacy, was immediately discovered. Parker was arrested and tried, bringing an end to the ship that was ironic. A vessel famous for an unsolved maritime vanishing ultimately met her end in a highly solved act of maritime crime. The Mary Celeste remains the ultimate historical paradox. She is the confluence of a genuine predisposition for misfortune, an unprovable moment of chemical terror, and a legal process biased by human suspicion. The lack of a final confirmed answer elevates her story beyond simple history, into the realm of enduring human myth.